Now, do you ever feel stressed? I would probably say that most of us do feel stressed from time to time, but when does it become a problem that really needs help and careful management? Best-selling author and award-winning entrepreneur Neil Shah set up the Stress Management Society back in 2003 and has been helping organisations and individuals since. His official title is Chief De-Stressing Officer, and he's here to offer us some advice today. So if you have any questions or comments, do feel free to join the conversation. Neil, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Pippa. It's a pleasure on this beautiful day that we have today.
Oh, makes a difference, doesn't it, the sunshine? Do you feel less stress then, do you think, or do we feel less stress when the sun's shining?
Well, absolutely. I think there's a lot of research around sunlight and exposure to the sun lifting our moods. And we all know that we feel that little bit of a spring in the step when spring descends upon us. And particularly during winter, there are people that actually suffer from seasonal affective disorder where, the grey and the clouds and the shorter days and the lessened access to sunlight can actually have a significant impact on our moods.
Yeah, sure. Well, I knew people who years ago in the office used to sit next to these light boxes, which they claim made a real difference. But let's hope some natural sunshine will really improve things for us. Neil, I've got to say, I'm intrigued by the story behind the Stress Management Society. This was a result, wasn't it, of your own overwhelming experience of stress?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is actually our 20-year anniversary. It's 20 years since we came into existence. And, my backstory before setting this organisation up isn't professional or academic. I'm not coming at it off the back of studies or qualifications. I came at it off the back of life experience. I started my first business when I was 24. Managed to somehow turn it into a multi-million-pound business. And I was still not quite sure how that happened. But that resulted in an experience where it was kind of too much, too young, too quick. And if you watch the movie Wolf of Wall Street, when I first watched that movie, I thought, this is my life story, because it went to my head and I kind of ended up living somewhat of an ego-fueled existence. And when you're on a path that's not serving your destiny, the universe has a way of giving you a bit of a course correction. And that resulted in me at the age of 28 having an experience which in a very short period of time, over the space of a couple of months, lost everything. Business gone, cars repossessed, money gone. Most of the people I thought my closest friends turned their back on me. The person I was in a relationship was cheating on me. Literally everything I defined myself by disappeared in a short period of time. And when I first started sharing my personal story about 5 or 6 years ago, which was 15 years after it actually happened, a lot of people thought, oh my God, that's really sad. But, it wasn't common that people were sharing these kind of experiences. Particularly over the last few years, we've had more people that have had such experiences. And that sadly led me to the point where I had, at the time what was described as a breakdown, and now I understand that it was something I had to go through to end up where I am today. And the depths of which I got to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore, and I actually took action against that. And I think, for anyone that's ever done any sort of deep psychotherapy work or been part of the 12-step program, they always say that you have to hit rock bottom before you can really start to get the leverage to start taking yourself up again. And I did very much hit rock bottom.
It's funny. It's a phrase that I've just written down here, before you said it, that rock bottom moment, because this is the thing. Yep. It's very unusual, isn't it, for every aspect of your life to sort of cave in. Very often, perhaps there's one element of it, maybe relationship, it could be career, which isn't going so well, but another part of your life sort of buoys you up a little, but everything all at once, that must have been overwhelming.
Yeah, well, we say that, but they're all connected, right? How many relationships break down because of financial stress and financial pressure? In fact, there was a research I read, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was a good percentage of relationships end in divorce. Financial strain and financial challenges is a significant contributing factor. And obviously, when one or two areas of your life are impacted, then others start to fray as well. Because we're all different aspects of these are all different aspects of the same being. And now when I look back and I'm able to look at it through the understanding I've gained over the last 20 years, I can see the connection between all of the different areas. When one area started to suffer, that had a knock-on effect to others. And thankfully, for me, I was able to find a way forward from that. I ended up, it's a long story for another day, but I ended up going to the Himalayas because I just wanted to get myself back on top of the world again. And I was in a deep, dark valley in my life. And it was whilst I was out there, I had I guess, a bit of a spiritual epiphany where I realized I just had a tough, challenging experience, but it was a gift. And I could use that gift to help other people who may be going through the same kind of thing. And that's why we started the Stress Management Society as a non-profit organization to essentially help people that were going through sort of stress and mental health challenges and weren't necessarily getting access to the support, because, this is, bear in mind, this is pre-iPhone, this is pre-kind of, Facebook and Twitter. This is in a very different world. And at that time, I kind of felt that the pressure's only going to get worse. And over the last 20 years, we've been basically campaigning to start removing the guilt, shame and stigma associated with the subject of stress and mental health, to really make it easier for people to open up and to start speaking about it without fear of looking like they're not good enough or they can't cope or they're weak. Because actually, for me, it's the strong amongst us that can put their hands up and say, I'm having a tough time, and ask for help. It's, this whole kind of soldier on, pull your socks up and get on with it, grown men don't cry. And these kind of phrases, for me, are quite toxic in the world we live in, which is how we've got to the point where this is one of the biggest issues affecting our society. Men causes death for a man under the age of 45 and rapidly becoming the same for 18 to 29-year-olds. We need to take action. And because we don't talk about it enough, we aren't taking enough action to do something about it. We are hoping to change that, particularly with the campaign that we're running for April, which has now been running for almost 30 years, to ensure that we have a space, time and the platform to really start having meaningful dialogues. And more than that, this year the theme is to take action. It's time for action, to be able to, all of us individually and collectively, take action to start to positively impact this issue, which is, as I said, one of the biggest issues affecting our society, even though we don't talk about it.
It's interesting, though, you're saying about taking action. When you are at rock bottom, and you sound to me like a really highly motivated person who's very good at sort of, finding ways forward. But when everything is caved in and when you're feeling so low and perhaps you've got bad depression as well as all this stress, it's really hard, isn't it, to do something different, to make that break, to take action, because all you really want to do is climb under the duvet.
Exactly, and Pippa, this is for me one of the biggest challenges. Is whenever I do these kind of interviews, and particularly during Stress Awareness Month, it's literally several a day, and people are like, "Oh, what's the top 3 things that you can do to reduce stress or to manage your mental health?" Now, again, if we were having a conversation, I said to you, "What's the top things that you can do to improve your well-being?" We all know we should drink 2 liters of water a day. We all know we should eat 5 bits of fruits and vegetables. We all know we should sleep 8 hours a night. Most people know we should walk 10,000 steps. It's not the knowing bit that changes your life. You have to actually do it. This year, the theme, why we're so focused on taking action is actually most of us know what we should be doing, but actually the thought of having to find time to walk, to meditate, to turn your phone off and all these kind of things, for some people can actually create more stress. So the actual doing the things that bring you benefit feels like just something else I need to do. And actually I found more recently I'm getting more kickback from people when we're suggesting things that could actually help them to improve their resilience to dealing with the demands of modern life. They actually get stressed about doing these additional things. What I would really like us to talk about is what are the barriers for us to do the things that we know are going to make us feel better. Because we all know when you've had a good night's sleep, you wake up feeling better equipped to cope with whatever life challenges throw at you. When you eat healthier, you feel more vitalized. When you drink more water, you have more energy. Yet even though not only do we know these things, most of us would trust in that information because you've got direct experience of the benefits from doing these things. Why is it as a society we know exactly what we should do, yeah, we don't do it.
Yeah, I know. But it's things like, you say get more sleep and get more exercise. But a lot of people who work, I'm thinking about my daily sort of life. It's usually really busy and job takes priority. And, I start generally quite early. So in order to get up, in order to go for, say, a walk, which I try and do every day, for 2.5 miles, I've got to get up extra early. And you lose out on the sleep then, don't you? It's a vicious circle.
It is. And I think this is the thing. We live in a world that is filled with very loud barking dogs, and we tend to focus on the dogs that bark the loudest. Now, those the gentle puppies in the corner that aren't making much noise, but actually will give you the most love and the most positive attention and the most feedback are the ones that get the least attention. What I mean by that, what is the loudest barking dog that most of us have? is our smartphone devices, right? Like, because they're constantly pinging off with information. Most of us start work the moment we open our eyes and finish when we go to sleep, because you've got a device that's essentially got you always on, right? Like, we're constantly plugged in. So in a way, we have become our own worst enemies. So it's not so much that we don't have the time, it's most of us are prioritizing the things that are clawing most on our attention. And then you get yourself in a vicious circle, because the most efficient people, the ones that get the most done, end up with more delegated to them, or more things that they end up taking responsibility for. So how can we start to find time for the things that actually nourish us and build our resilience?
And so is it a case of, I always have been told in the past that sitting down and writing a list is a really good way of getting things or making things happen. Do you adhere to that? Because it's there, it's physical, it's in front of you. You've got a kind of way forward.
Making a list, yeah, definitely. But also, if you had to eat a frog every day, otherwise you're going to explode. A lot of people would put it off all day and wait until the last possible minute, till 11:59 to eat it. The best way to deal with that frog that you've got to swallow is get it out of the way as soon as you wake up, and then you've got the rest of the day free with no pressure, and that frog not sitting at the back of your mind knowing you've got to eat it. So what I mean by that is the kind of things that we tend to say, I'll do it later, like I'll go for the walk, I'll go to the gym, I'll do some yoga, I'll take some time to read or write or journal. Do it first thing. And, exactly as you said, yes, you might need to get up a little bit earlier, but then you are going through the day with a little bit of mental clarity and headspace, because you've got that thing done, that thing that you are most likely to drop off the list. The other thing to do is schedule time. Most of us live with some kind of a diary system or even an electronic diary. And particularly for me, if I don't put in time for myself, someone else will fill it. I've got colleagues that are booking in time for me, booking in meetings, etc. So I will literally make sure that I've got a meeting with myself booked in for an hour every day. If nothing urgent happens, that hour is going to be me going out for a walk, like I've just come back from a lovely walk in the sunshine. If something urgent happens, I've got some buffer time, which means that I'm not getting over pressure, which doesn't mean then I'm going to be working till 8 o'clock at night just to catch up with things. So booking in time with yourself and scheduling things. But, as we've just discussed, as you've suggested, yes, you might need to get up a few minutes early. But if you can get that thing done that's going to start your day in the right way, that for me is the perfect way to set the tone for the day, by doing something for you.
Do you know, I'd never thought about that before. It's such a simple but clever idea, isn't it? Just book an appointment with yourself and be disciplined and treat yourself as an important client, maybe.
Exactly. And there's something else as well, which particularly over the last couple of years has happened for a lot of people, is the demarcation between work and home has gone, because many people are now working from home, working remotely, or working hybrid. So that white space you had between work and home, the commute, whether that's in the car, on the bus, on the train, whatever, is giving you kind of a little bit of a gap between your home and your work. And what's happened, a lot of people that think they're working from home actually now live at work. It's just their home has been taken over by their workplace, because the bulk of their waking hours they're working. So one of the things I always encourage people to do, if you're working at home for any reason, whether it's an ongoing basis or just temporarily, get up and leave your house and go for a walk. Even if it's raining and miserable, even if it's chucking it down or blowing a gale force wind, walk around the block for 10 or 15 minutes. When you arrive back to your home, just now put yourself in the mental headspace, I'm now at work. When you leave work, when you finish work for the day, you log off or whatever it is that you're doing, you kind of switch off what you're doing, leave the house, and once again, have a virtual commute. Because again, that's creating a mental barrier between work and home. And these little simple practices can make a tremendous difference, because a lot of people think that you have to invest hours a day meditating and doing yoga and this, that, and the other. Those things, if you've got the time for that, great. But a little bit of time applied correctly can give you those little reset moments, can give you kind of the moments to switch off and unplug. That last hour before bed is another great opportunity where turn technology off, spend some time with your family, talk, read, listen to music, have a bath, but something that is taking you away from things that are happening outside this moment. Yeah. Mindfulness, a lot of people think is meditation. Mindfulness is literally being present in this moment with no judgment, not thinking about the past or the future, because that's where most of our stress happens. We're concerned or worrying about things that have already happened, or we're anxious or stressing about things that haven't happened yet. Bringing yourself into this moment, whatever it is that you're doing, is going to allow you to be present to something that is real, and that can be a really powerful way to reset ourselves.
These are brilliant tips, and I've had a really good peruse of your website, which is great. It's got loads of tips like this and advice, and it's got loads of detail. The one thing I was interested by was kind of like the definition of stress, because the website says that stress is a much used and abused term these days. What do you see stress as being?
It's a great question. And when I say use and abuse, I don't say that lightly. We have demonized stress, and it's kind of become a bit of a catch-all phrase for all of our negative experiences. And you ask a room full of people. I was at a conference recently. It's about 1,000 people in the audience. And I asked, how many of you have ever experienced stress? And every hand goes up. But you ask them to define it, and we literally had 3 hands go up. People are really struggling to define stress, even though it's something that we all constantly talk about. And it's like, oh, I'm so stressed. What does it actually mean? Well, going back to our biology lessons at school, it's very much the fight or flight response, where there's hormones like adrenaline and cortisol that are produced by the body to essentially put you into survival mode, to deal with the saber-toothed tiger. When our ancient ancestors first surfaced on the plains of East Africa a couple 100,000 years ago, it was the response that equipped us to fight hard or run fast. It's not that we get stressed that's the problem. It's most of us are getting stressed in situations where it serves no constructive purpose, because as much as you might want to smash your computer to bits and run out of the house or the office, it's probably not the most appropriate response. So we've gone into a state of physical preparation for action, and yet there is no action forthcoming, which is where we get stuck in that state. And essentially, I rather than thinking about I'm stressed or I'm not stressed, people talk about good stress and bad stress, which I don't necessarily agree with. I'd like you to think of it more as a Goldilocks and the Three Bears approach to stress, where the stress porridge is too hot, too cold, and just right. When it's too hot is when we have too much stress, we're overloaded, we're going to start burning out. When it's too cold, and particularly during sort of lockdown and during that period, there were a lot of people that felt that, where there isn't much to do, where people were furloughed, they couldn't work, they couldn't live their normal lives. And that actually creates a lot of kind of feelings of indifference, loss of energy, loss of motivation, loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem. We become quite apathetic, indifferent, bitter, and that can lead to depression. So the porridge being too cold is also quite challenging. And then you've got a space where it's just right, where your mental, physical, and emotional performance is optimized. Yes, it's still stress, but it's being channeled in a way that's serving you. So I guess the way to think about it, if you think of a bridge that has too much weight, load, and demand on it, it doesn't matter if it's Tower Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, Sydney Harbour Bridge, every bridge on the planet, if enough pressure is applied for long enough, that bridge will ultimately collapse. But before it collapses, we're going to know it's not coping particularly well, because there'll be early signs: bowing, buckling, groaning, and creaking. At that point, you've got one of two choices. Either you take some of the weight and the load off to better equip the bridge to bear the load, or you reinforce it with concrete blocks and iron girders. Now, as human beings, we are exactly the same. Every human being on this planet, bar none, if you put enough mental, emotional pressure on them, eventually they are going to collapse. And that collapse could be serious. It could be having a breakdown. It could be, sadly, loss of life. It could be serious illness like heart disease, diabetes, stroke. Stress is a contributing factor, both directly and indirectly, to a number of serious, what are known as lifestyle diseases. But before you get anywhere near the point where the human bridge is likely to collapse, there will also be those early signs, the changes in behavior, the change in habits. We're not sleeping well. We're eating more, junk food, sugar, chocolate, consuming more alcohol, caffeine, changes in behavior. We stop caring and about how we present ourselves, withdrawing, disengaging. There's a whole variety of things that happen that will indicate someone is not coping particularly well. Yeah. One of the things I'm going to encourage everyone to do is, what are your signs? What does it look like when your bridge is bowing and buckling? Now, when that's happening, you've got the same choices. What can we offload or delegate? Can we, send the kids off to the grandparents for a couple of days? Could you book yourself a bit of a holiday? Could you ask for some help with your workload? Could you ask your partner to help with stuff around the house? What can you do to either temporarily or permanently remove some of the pressure you're under? Now, I totally appreciate we've got responsibilities, we've got commitments. It's not easy for us to offload. And also, a lot of the things that are on our bridge may not even be our stuff, because we're living in very much an episode of Black Mirror at the moment. I have no idea what's going to happen next, but you couldn't have made up the things that have happened over the last few years. So Yeah, exactly. So you kind of wake up and there's stuff on your bridge which is completely outside your control. These are macro level things that are socio-political, economic, there's all kinds of crazy things going on in the world which end up on our bridge. So you may not have the ability to take anything off your bridge, but even if you can't, there is another option, which is what can you do to strengthen your bridge? The kind of things that we're talking about, that, what was often called self-care, which can sometimes be viewed as a bit of pink and fluffy. But for me, this is essential. This is what's going to stop your bridge from collapsing. Our definition of stress, beyond this visual image of a bridge, in words, is where demand exceeds resources. So if the demand you're being subjected to is greater than your capacity to cope, and you have no ability to reduce the demand, then what can you do to exceed your resources? And these are the kind of things that we've been talking about, is having those times to reset and reboot, to look after yourself, to eat well, to stay hydrated, to exercise, to socialize. In fact, all the things you are less likely to want to do when you're stressed are the things that are going to bring the most benefit.
Yeah, it all makes an awful lot of sense. You set up the Stress Management Society 20 years ago as a non-profit organisation. And I know that you do an awful lot of work with employers, don't you? And encourage them to make changes to help staff deal with stress. Is that working? Are they responsive to that?
Absolutely. In fact, if I go back to when we first started, you'd often be speaking to a HR advisor and they want you to come in, run a half an hour, 45-minute workshop and tell people what to do to deal with stress. Now we work with some of the biggest companies on the planet, and we fund all of our non-commercial activities through working with very large corporate organizations looking at culture change. This has been accelerated. It's no longer just a pink and fluffy, let's do some workshops and fruit boxes and do some yoga. Now we're looking at kind of as a strategic sort of proposition, where if you think about all those wonderful things that people would do in the workplace, have processes and policies and employee assistance programs and staff counselling and pool tables and meditation rooms and all these kind of wonderful things, they're great, but they are pieces of the jigsaw. Really what I'm interested in, more than the piece of the jigsaw, is what's the picture on the front of the box, because only then can we identify, do we have the right pieces? Are we assembling the pieces correctly to build that picture? Now, at the moment we're doing it with companies, some of them have 70, 80, 100,000 employees. We would like to do this at a national level. We'd like countries to kind of consider this. Do we have the right frameworks? Is our healthcare system fitting with kind of our approach to employment? Is it fitting with our approach to local government? Every facet of our society, of our communities, function as a collective to help us to build the picture on the front of the box. And I think this is one of the challenges that we face is, in many organizations, they're looking at what's best in the short term, but not what's going to help us to build the long-term vision essentially I'm working towards a vision of net zero trauma on this planet, right? Mm-hmm. Where we get to the point where there are less people in trauma than are experiencing heightened trauma. Now, what we've got at the moment in the world that we find ourselves on is there are way more people experiencing trauma than aren't. We're talking about 1 in 4 people experiencing mental health issues. We're talking about, we discussed issues around suicide being one of the key causes of death in Western society. We're talking about, the amount of people experiencing burnout. So I would judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable members. That's a Mahatma Gandhi quote. I feel that we need to do better to stop failing some of the most vulnerable members of our society. And part of that is to look at how do we start working together and looking at all of the different service provisions. So we're working together to ensure that we're building this picture of a society that gets better at looking after its weak and vulnerable members, whether that be old people or sick people or people that are struggling with their mental and emotional health. Because I think that at the moment, the services and support we have isn't adequate for the amount of people that are really struggling, and that's sadly something that I face every single day. And our vision is to create a happy, healthy, and more resilient world, and we can only do that where every person that is listening today, every person that is exposed to these messages, comes on board as a champion, so we can all work together to create the societies, the communities, and the world we want to live in.
It's identifying those signs, though, isn't it? You've sadly, I know, Neil, gone through the trauma of losing a friend who took their own life, so it can be hard, can't it, to recognise the signs of stress in people.
Again, you know what's hard, Pippa, is I'm a trained professional. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and it was only a year ago, and he was one of my closest friends, and I knew he was going through a tough time. But I guess sometimes that you know. When you're too close to a situation, you can develop blind spots because it's very hard to be impartial when you have thoughts and feelings about a person. And as I said, he was a very, very close friend. And, you know, that experience was actually harder than me going through a first-hand experience of a similar nature. I felt like a fraud. I literally considered turning my back on my career because I didn't feel I could do this anymore because I failed one of the closest people to me in my life. And this is one of those things that, as you get talking about it, it's kind of like there are other issues. For example, miscarriage is another one. It's a very common issue. I think it's 1 in 4 pregnancies. Don't quote me on this. I believe it's 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. But it's because we don't talk about it. You don't know how common it is. Yeah. So, and sadly, it's the same with other issues around sort of mental health and suicidality as well. It's only when you start talking about it, you recognize how many people have had these kind of experiences, but we just don't talk about it. And I find as a society, we tend to focus on the things we talk about. I'm not for a second suggesting we should all be talking negatively about the experiences we've had, but getting better at opening up a dialogue so we can start reaching people long before they get anywhere near the point where an experience like that is likely to manifest in a negative outcome. And I think this is where even this conversation today is great because anyone listening that might be having a tough time, there is help available. There is support out there. There are people that have had these experiences. You are not alone.
Well, your work is certainly making it easier for people to share their feelings. And so it's a really noble ambition, and we wish you all the very best with it. You mentioned a campaign. Which is this running currently then, the campaign that you're...
Yeah, we've got a couple of campaigns running. The one that we launched last year is called Choose Hope, which is under hashtag Choose Hope, and that's at choosehope.org.uk. And that's really just about offering a counter-narrative. It's not all doom, gloom, death and devastation and destruction. There is enough amazing things that happen in the world every day. And as we start to get exposed to some of those positive stories, it actually starts to have a positive effect on us. What I'm encouraging everyone to do is let's start flooding all channels with a counter-narrative, with stories of hope. Because people that have hope are happier, healthier, live longer, do better in their careers, and are wealthier. And that's not some hippie woo-woo law of attraction thing. It's because when you have hope, you're more likely to take action. You're more likely to get off the sofa and go for that walk and do some exercise. You're more likely to push yourself in your career. You're more likely to put in the effort in your relationship if you feel they can get better. So the Choose Hope very much connects with the Stress Awareness Month campaign, which is Act Now. Hope gives us the ability to act because we believe things can get better. So what I'm encouraging people to do is have hope things can get better and make a commitment at any point during this month of Stress Awareness Month. Make a commitment to do one or two things. So, Pippa, I'm going to put you on the spot now. What are you willing to commit to over the next for a 30-day period that's going to improve your well-being? It could be anything. I will share with you mine. I'm doing an ice bath every day for 30 days. I'm getting in a bucket of iced water, which has positive benefits to improve the well-being. I'm not for a second asking you to do anything extreme. It could even be making that commitment to your 2.5-mile walk. Yeah. But I'm encouraging everyone to make that commitment, to do something which you know, will hopefully start taking you day by day, one step closer to having a stronger, more resilient bridge.
I might turn the temperature down on the shower for, say, a minute each day so it's cold. That works, doesn't
Fantastic.
it? I tell you something, though. I love your energy, Neil, because you have no limits. And I've seen a little bit about the stuff that you do. Loads of endurance events, physical challenges. That really works for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm very much someone that needs something physical to focus on because it takes me out of my head. Yeah. As you probably gathered by the way I talk, I'm very energetic and very passionate, and I need to channel that energy into something. It's part of being, I have OCD, so I guess it would be classified as a neurodiversity. And I found a way of healthily channeling that, because otherwise I can very much get stuck down rabbit holes that don't serve me. So by doing physical things, whether that be walking or exercising or doing Ironman triathlons or ice bath plunges, these things help me to have healthy, positive outlets for that, the energy that I tend to wake up with every day.
And the other really simple thing, I've seen a picture of you with a dog. Have you got dogs?
Yes. So very sadly, it was only a couple of weeks ago, my dog sadly passed away. My dog was my best friend for the last 10 years, and he was a huge part of my well-being. He was my best friend. He was my work colleague. He was the chief happiness officer in our company. And, you know, it's interesting. Losing a dog is not like losing a human. It's like losing your left arm, because he was with me at work, at home. We were out walking every day. So
I'm completely with you. Yeah, I'm completely.
Yeah.
We lost ours a few years ago, and it's exactly the same. And that's one of those other things, because we've always said animals can make a huge difference, can't they, to your outlook,
Absolutely.
to your positivity. So maybe that's something that we commit to. Getting another dog at some point. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Neil. It's sad.
Thank you. Yeah, still coming to terms with that. But even if it's not your own dog, visit like a local dogs trust. Actually, particularly those of us listening that may not have other humans to connect with. Just hugging a dog creates an oxytocin release. And Nanook, who was my dog, when he was younger, we used to take him to a hospice as kind of to offer a bit of therapy. And there were people that hadn't had time around animals, and the joy and the energy it gave them just being able to spend time around a puppy. So, if you can get out to visit a friend that's got a dog, spend time around animals, because children and animals for me are the best way to uplift yourself, because life is simple through the eyes of a dog or a child.
We've become dog babysitters a lot over the last few years, and it's great. Do you know, you've given us so many ideas. If people want to find out more, and you've got fantastic resources on the website, loads of ideas there. Easy to find.
It's the one thing that I'm going to encourage people to look at is our 30-day challenge. So we've put together a calendar with loads of ideas, and you'll find that at stress.org.uk. And you can find us on all social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as I said, as you said, there's loads of free tools. But the one thing I'll direct everyone towards is the 30-day challenge with the calendar of different ideas, and make that commitment to yourself, whatever it is you're going to commit to, however little, even if it's only 5 minutes a day. Doing that for 30 days is highly likely to retrain your brain into new, more positive habits and behaviors. And hopefully you'll be able to maintain them long beyond the 30-day challenge.
I'm feeling inspired now. And one of these days,
Amazing.
Neil, I'm going to get you back and we'll talk about the Himalayas. That sounds like an amazing story.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to I'd love to do that in your studio. Give me an excuse to come to sunny Devon, which I'm looking forward to doing at some point.
Brilliant. Let us know when you're on your way and we'll arrange something. Neil, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
Lovely
Pippa.
to speak. All the very best. That's
take care. Bye-bye.
stress expert Neil Shah. If you want to find out more about the Stress Management Society, do take a look at their website. It is www.stress.org.uk. One step at a time. We'll get there.